This is the first time we've done this session. It should be pretty casual. You should feel free to jump up. We've got microphones. Remember, our live stream people cannot hear you unless you use the microphone. So please do, if you don't want to ask the question, ask someone around you to go ask the question from the microphones. But we really just want this to be informational and just go at whatever pace you want, whether it's 30 minutes or an hour. We'll just go through all the topics we started this morning, and happy to get feedback from myself, but also you've got some subject matter experts in the room. Rob Larson, our data dictionary chair, is down here. We've got a lot of directors in the room. So we'll get started. And this is the same presentation as this morning, so we'll skip some of these slides here. But are there any questions as we get started on international, the event itself, or the multi-language standard? As I ask these, I know you're not all going to jump up right away. But if you get up at a certain point and you have a question that was a few slides back, it's fine. We'll go back and forth as we need to as we go through. So I think the big emphasis with CEPI is that we have a trade organization who's asking us to be a part of that event. So that makes it a very serious and credible event. And the MLS community in the past couple weeks, when really just got these invites very recently, have started coming out to be a part of that event. So we're excited about it, and invite any questions you have if you're thinking about it. Saul Klein over here is speaking with us at the event, so our MLS historian speaker for that. So excited and looking forward to it. I do also have to tell you, if we get 5 minutes in and no one asks a question, I'm just going to stand here silently, start calling out names. Oh, we've got somebody already. Here we go.
Is there an online option for that international forum? I couldn't tell from the registration whether there was or not.
And thank you for the first question being one I can't answer.
You're welcome.
It's a good question. We'll find out. I think it was intended really just to be there for people in person. It's a different crowd. It's very different. We're going to have government officials. We're going to have trade organization folks there, policy people, attorneys who understand European law and pro-competition law, and it's really intended to be sort of leaders from brokerage, MLS, trade associations, as well as the government officials there, but we'll find out. I don't know that we have a live stream planned for it. And I think Catherine's getting up.
Okay, hi, Catherine McIntosh with Listed. I find this so exciting that we're taking RESO standards to an international level. Has there been, or is there going to be a discussion about a world MLS? You know, where are we with maybe having the MLS technology finally move outside North America?
Can you go into a little more detail on your question there?
Yeah, I guess here in the US and then in Canada, and I guess from our talk this morning with Mexico and some other regions, they're thinking about using the system for standards. So I guess the one question is, what even makes an MLS? How do you become an MLS? What is an association, right? What is the model? Because I know that even here it's very different. Is it brokers that come together and it's broker owned? So if we are to use standards globally, what will the entities who participate in that international standard look like? Are they going to be like we are, like different MLS options here, or is that going to come up at the conference? Or?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. And also thank you for saying your name as you go up. If you could talk to, at the microphone, say your name and your company so the folks in the live stream know who you are. They look very different so far. That's been the interesting part. And so we are there to express what value data standards, technology standards have, but also with CMLS coming to talk about the governance and policy and compliance that are really the critical foundation of an MLS. But then these organizations that are building MLSs, their customers demand technology now. You know, we had the paper MLSs to start. Nobody's going to sign up in a new MLS marketplace if they don't have technology, and almost most of them demand mobile technology right away. So those two things are critical. We're finding some of the MLSs, the governments want to run them. The governments want to run the front-facing, consumer-facing side, and some of those governments are funding the software to build those MLSs. We're finding some are funded by banks, and we have much more of a separation between banks and brokerages and MLSs here, actually legal separations there. But that's the There's a Belgian bank that's funding the MLS in the Czech Republic that's building out their MLS on data dictionary standard. So lots of different models. They can look at the resources we have and they can pick and choose what works for their market. And there will be differences. You could look at the lawsuits here and say, wow, the American model, there's problems there. Pick and choose the best parts of it. That's what we're really there to offer them. And it's why they're asking us to come there and talk through these issues with them.
But Sam, Dan Ray, Sierra MLS. It sounds like they are successfully avoiding the hyper-locality that we arose from. It sounds like they're starting in a more unified way than us, at least at the country level. Is that fair to say?
Probably true,
okay.
Because we had 1,000 realtor associations, so they built their own MLSs. And when you start in a digital age, you build a business differently than you would have in an analog. So I think so. Most of the time we're seeing one, maybe 2 or 3 MLS organizations in a country where these are popping up. But it's very new. Again, we didn't have more than probably 2, 3 countries in membership 2 years ago. And they're really popping up kind of everywhere right now. So they may find that it's actually much more efficient to have a fewer number of MLSs serving their markets.
Cool,
yeah.
Thanks.
Michael McKay, Greater Alabama. I also wanted to know if this was going to be more of an annual conference too, because one of those things where I'm starting to budget for the next year or the following years. It's something that my board is asking me to see if this is something we want to pursue at the same time.
Let's hope so. Yeah, it's the first of its kind, so it's a good question, but I think we've seen the support grow really fast in the past month. So if it's providing the value to these organizations, representatives from 33 countries, I think, now are coming, then it would make sense to do it on an annual basis and hopefully to get technologies in front of these folks so they can do that alongside the governance. But working with groups like NAR Global, who obviously does a lot of this outreach already, and understanding how to run a well-governed MLS, there are a lot of opportunities for that. So some folks said maybe we do it in Florence next year. It's a little bit ahead of where we are right now, but sure, budget for it. We hope it'll happen.
That's exciting.
Greg.
Thanks, Sam. Greg Moore. Obviously, I see a great value proposition for RESO in this. I mean, being able to see what's happening globally and maybe even shape that. Can you help us understand that a little more?
I think to your point, what we discussed this morning, and Greg's one of our directors who helped us ratify the RESO Common Format Standard. Not every marketplace is necessarily going to use the same API as we use because they don't have 500 MLSs. They may not need a common transport. Now they might. It's nice to have that certainty for transport, that the data consumers know exactly how to ask for data. But if they just want to use the data dictionary and they just want to use RESO Common Format to move data around, they might actually become more standardized downstream in the marketplace faster because we've focused so much on MLS for so long getting those APIs right. The other technology companies in those countries could be immediately using RESO standards to move data around. So huge membership opportunity for sure, but really more about the marketplace outcomes. That's the real excitement there. We can come back to this if you want, so feel free to jump up at any time. So this is our process. Our work groups, you know the names of the work groups, but it's not just a flat set of work groups. They have to be in alignment. That's our process at the organization, is we get great ideas from our members in our pain point sessions. Just throughout the year, we'll have a meeting and a new idea will come up. Usually, that needs to go through R&D. R&D is where good new ideas go to get vetted to say, is it a good RESO idea? It might be a good thing that needs to be fixed in the market, but it might be something for CMLS to do, for NAR to do. So R&D vets those things that come out of members, out of pain points, out of the broker advisory group, and then they make their way through our core work groups, which are data dictionary, and there are a lot of models that fill out the data dictionary. So you've seen we've had an event model, the internet tracking model, interoperability, brings models for transaction management to the data dictionary. We've got the temporary short-term subgroups as well. And then the unique identifiers, the UPI, the UOI, eventually the unique licensee identifier. Those all have to align with the data dictionary for our products to work together. And they also have to align with our transport. And as we're talking about now, not everything has to be Web API. Now, MLSs in the US have to get that Web API certification. But once those things are in alignment, then they're brought to our board liaison committee, which is the chairs of all the different work groups. And they get together and say, are we sure? Are we sure this is going to work? We're not going to send a spec to the board to ratify unless data dictionary agrees that this complies with their model. So that's just sort of the guts of the progress, of the process for our work groups. Feels a little bit in the weeds sometimes, but it's good that you know that's how the process works. And then when it's ratified, it comes back out to the membership to implement in the marketplace. Any questions? That's the most exciting part, I'm sure. Conference agenda questions? Probably not. You've got it on your phone. So this part of the certification conversation we had, I don't think we've really presented it this way to the general membership before, because for most of you, you don't really want to be involved in the certification. You just want to get the certification from your vendor. But are there any questions on the way we use the API certification for the basically 40 ways to ask for data, and then standard ways to respond to that, the menu or the metadata, the way that your MLS software provider displays what's available to the data consumers, and then the product, the actual property records that are sent back to the vendor. I think I'll just let that one hang because I bet you'll have a question on that, but we'll keep moving through. Tell me, a lot of you have seen this movie. I heard a couple chuckles this morning, but okay. So this is one thing that there's a little bit more detail and depth to. So with these new standards that we've ratified, which is the new data dictionary and the new Web API, we stop giving new certifications on the old standards. So we won't be doing new certifications for data dictionary 1.7. And we won't be doing new certifications for Web API 2.1. So all that means is anyone going forward looking for a certification will need to use the new standards. Current certifications are still live, and for 12 months, they'll still show as current certifications. And then after 12 months, we're going to turn those into legacy certifications. They're still there. We don't cancel them at RESO, but it's a year where we change the labeling after a year of a new standard, where those will be legacy, and then the data dictionary 2.0 will be the current standard. So we discussed earlier, NAR, realtor-owned MLSs have different policies about when they need to be in compliance there. But from a RESO perspective, that's our timeline for moving forward on those. And as we talked about, it's a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of work for your vendors this year. But we figure a year is a good timeline to say, hopefully, you can all make that transition there and get that consistency for your customers. A lot of you in the room are the ones who are already on this list, who've converted your customers. Anybody out there thinking about starting to move their MLS customers over to Web API, actually pushing that conversion that needs more help? How many of you in the room has your MLS already converted all of your customers' data feeds? A couple hands? A few? Quite a few. And you know the 80-20 in MLS. 20% of the MLSs have 80% of the subscribers, which is why we're at 45% of data feeds and 2/3 committed at this point. But still a lot of work to do. So if you want help, the guide's obviously there on our website if you want to use this Web API guide, but just call us directly too. We're happy to go through the details of what other MLSs have done to make it through that process.
Catherine McIntosh was listed. Just a question on that, Sam, is when you're a vendor wanting to bring great services to MLS members and you're not part of the MLS and the MLS needs to adopt that, what ways are there to kind of bring to the different systems and MLSs the benefits of this adoption, and how much is it a business decision at the MLS or association level, or a vendor level conversation, or a mixture of the two, or all three of us? Yeah.
Yeah, I think you said it well. It's a business decision. It's not up to RESO whether you do it or not. It's up to your organization to decide when and where you do it. Are we heavily trying to influence people to make this improvement for their customers? Yes, absolutely. But it's a business decision for each MLS. So I think you can take things like Dan Troop's REMAX session today. We'll package these up after events into videos and blog posts. The biggest brokerage companies in the industry are saying this is important, this is better, we want this. And I think that's really the best way to sell it. Is that your biggest customers want this. It's provably better than what's there before, according to the technology people who work for brokers. And that's a nice sort of positive carrot approach to giving them that. Because we could talk about how it looks bad that you're not up to date on technology like your competitors, but it's nice to have the positive side as well. I feel like we need some low background music going on in here just to give it a little more of a vibe. We'll try that next time. So Data Dictionary 2.0, we talked a little bit about again. I imagine this group doesn't necessarily want to get into the details of the actual specs and testing. But are there questions on the way that we're describing the certification process and the changes from 1.7 to 2.0? I think one of the quickest things to say is it's mostly about lookups. It's mostly about enforcing lookups that we didn't in the past. So your drop-down menu items, your statuses that used to not get they were tested, but the rules weren't enforced because the community had said too early. We're not there yet on Data Dictionary 1.7. We're not ready for that. There are about 500,000 lookups that we found in MLS systems so far. So there's a lot to work through there. But that being said, the community has said it's time to do that, which is why, as we talked about, there's a large number of lookups to be fixed in MLS systems. Some of these we're going to find are false positives when they get flagged during certification. When we talked about this country road versus county road, and a real standard field is county road. Country road can also be a local unique field. These situations will pop up. And we'll save those, obviously, because we always talk about miles to volcano in Hawaii. I don't think they actually really use that, but we always say that in the DD meetings, that those local fields are important to those marketplaces, and those will be recognized and documented. John Bro's up here looking as bored as he possibly could be.
Sam, I had a question.
Yeah.
Cindy Miller, Netris. So the IDX payload is not part of this certification yet?
Sorry, I didn't hear the
The
beginning.
IDX payload is not part of the 2.0 certification? I know they're in there.
Yeah. So payloads at this point, payloads started as one thing in the past that became basically just a descriptor at this point. So we've got lists of business cases where certain data fields might be useful for those. So IDX fields will be identified there, but there's not a requirement that people have certain fields. You find when you actually look at an MLS's data set, we worked with Joseph at MLS Grid looking at different data sets. MLSs have far more fields in their IDX data sets than what's in the IDX payload, which is a list of fields. But it's a good starting point informationally. And we're going to be working on that with the subgroups for Data Dictionary too, that are all looking at commercial and tax data and rental data, and just to bring informational tags basically that go along with those fields to say these are important for that business case, but none of those things are a requirement for any certifications at this point.
Gail Ludeman, MRED. My question is regarding the changeover, making those migrations for those 10 to 20 fields and those couple hundred lookups. Do we have a specific date that is due by in order to retain our highest and best RESO status?
So RESO doesn't have a deadline for you. to do that, but 1 year from November 1st is when this officially goes effective this year. And then 1 year from that, if you're still on Data Dictionary 1.7, then that will become a legacy certification and not a current certification. So it's not, you're not going to get your services cut off or anything.
Right.
That's not what we do. Most of that work's obviously done by your API vendor who's doing that mapping. You can continue to keep some of the legacy things that were there. So for example, if you had something that was misspelled and your customers need that, you can do the standard version and create a new field that's the right one, and then continue to hold on to that legacy field for a while if you need to, so that people convert across. People who want the standard new version, they'll have that. People who are not ready to convert downstream can hold on to the other. But there should be, obviously, a recommendation would be that there's a time limit on that so that you can move people across. So again, Realtor MLSs, the policy says you should be in compliance within 1 year from ratification.
So 1 year from November 1st
Right.
this year. Okay, thank
Right.
you.
It's NAR policy for Realtor-owned and operated MLSs. This was one of the coolest things actually that came out of analytics. We don't name vendors. We don't name vendors very often from here, but a couple of your vendors had some really amazingly faster services within really just a couple weeks after we started this testing. Greg.
Yeah, and I mean, this is really, but it's really touching on the great tools that are available to us as MLSs, like the test flight. And I mean, you don't have to be a vendor. You can be the local MLS to really see, where you might need to fix some lookups. And it's a great tool. I mean, you guys provide, think of, the tools that tell us, how many MLSs have used a standard field. I mean, all of those things, I think, on the street as an MLS, look at the wiki. I mean, there are all kinds of great tools available to, all of us at the MLS level to really look at our data and, improve, each and every time. I mean, I hate to say it, I'm assuming that many of you guys are going to need to get a forms committee together when you're looking at some of these things. And I mean, they're great tools that RESO has available online. Josh is a wonderful resource who can give you great advice, all of those things.
And that's a good clarification to make. Again, what we certify is what comes out of the RESO web API service that you have. A lot of you have different fields in your listing input screens, in your reports. Those are mapped and converted to the RESO standard version to come out of the web API. But to Greg's point, if on your forms you're using one word and on your listing input you're using a different word, and then on the reports it's a different word and it comes out of the API in a different form, it's not a great experience for your customers. So you've probably heard the concept native data dictionary. That's not something we certify, it's not something we require. Some companies feel it's a better experience for their customers that list price on the form, list price on the input, list price on the CMA, list price on the output from the API makes your life a lot better, not just for their agents and brokers, but for their customers. So that's something that organizations are sometimes choosing independently to do. I'm kind of hoping this group doesn't have any questions on this slide, but you might.
Here it comes, Dan.
And then this is the fun one. We're going to do a roundtable on this tomorrow morning as well, so you'll all get more of a preview here. But yeah, this is exciting. We've been talking about this for a long, long time, being able to do this for more than just the MLS side of the industry. Does this make sense to everyone? I mean, we could throw up the JSON on the screen and you'd see it, but I'm not sure that's any more educational than just this image, that if everyone maps to the same shape, then any other customer can just pull from that shape of data. It's a very straightforward thing for companies to do.
Okay, Catherine McIntosh. At lunch, we were talking about this, and I just think for the non-technical people, like that includes me, the idea of the RESO common schema, like you talked about this morning, is to have this language that we can all share. So we're speaking the same language, even internationally. But what I hadn't realized is there's a difference between the common schema is like the package, but then the transportation of it is left up to the vendor or the person that's transporting it. So I think that if you could just speak to the distinction between like the package and then the method of transportation used.
Yeah, I should have thought of that, so thank you for that question. Yeah, that's exactly described correctly, that the web API or RETS is just the way you transport data. It's not the data itself, the structure of that. So this takes that away. So we talked about like the new MLS in the Czech Republic. They're not using the RESO web API. They're using a different kind of API, but they're still packaging the data in data dictionary format. So this is where folks have always asked us, how do we get our brokers to get involved? How do I get my website company to get involved in RESO? How do I get my lead gen, my CRM company? Well, they can do this now. And at a minimum, if they want to do it to get a certification badge as the good guys in the industry, they can do it for that. But ideally, they want to do that so they have a production API where customers can go grab that data in a standardized format. So it will give folks who have been looking for ways. MLSs have carried the load for us for a long time. NAR and MLS members have really carried the water for RESO, which has been fundamental to our success, but bringing more of those other companies into the fold as part of the certification membership process will be really valuable. Oh no. Oh good, we skipped it. Multi-language standard. We had some questions at lunch actually over this. While we can define what the standard name is, we can define, this is actually not our definitions, these locales with countries and languages, these are other open standards that we use. We're not going, at this stage still, to validate that your French word for list price is the right one. It's not really our place to do at this point. We don't have a standard for everyone else's language, but the format's there for companies to work together and pass each other what kind of metadata that they need in each of those languages. It's possible at some point we have lots of languages, lots of translations officially ratified at RESO for the data dictionary. We do have some for Spanish already for display names. We worked with CREA on the French-Canadian versions, but that's not an official part of the standard at this stage. So there's a lot of work to do there still, but there are companies who can use this today because they already have those language data sets. Do we have any non-American companies in the room? We've got quite a few Canadians at the event today. We've got one over here. Yeah, it's a growing part of membership, which is really exciting. These groups, when we bring in the rental companies, actually the rental companies have worked really hard on the data dictionary space. It's been really exciting. It's a little harder on the commercial side because we've got most companies who really haven't spent a lot of time at RESO yet, but we do have probably 15 companies who you'd see as traditional commercial real estate companies who are taking part in that process, which is really exciting because they traditionally wouldn't be a part of this. I think what we see is probably less than 5% of MLSs in our membership have a significant commercial component. They may have it, but most of their brokers are using some other sort of system. But we can support those systems. They don't have to be using a traditional residential MLS software. They can use anything and still just use RESO format for that. So that's the goal, because we're not the only part of the industry. You've got builders and you've got lenders and you've got appraisers, and they've all got different systems. But if we can support what they do, RESO common format being one way, but also have the right fields that a commercial practitioner would need, then we've got opportunities to work with them as well. Alignment reports. So this will be part of our webinar in November, where our CTO will go through what each of these reports is and what it's used for. And again, we're not showing you the gritty one, which is thousands of fields and where they match up across different MLSs, but all the detailed data is there. This has been part of Our board of directors, one of their priorities is to make sure we're financially stable, because the industry has its ups and downs, and so building out some of these premium products that have been asked for by our members. That's the reason we built these products, is we had members come in and say, this would be really helpful for me in my integrations and my data shares, et cetera. So we'll have more information for you on that webinar about these reports, but if there are areas where you think it might help, we're happy to get that feedback and really to continue tweaking these as they're brand new. And if you really want to have some fun with it, you've got to get on a Zoom with Josh, because he's got 25 different layers of these visualizations for data shares, which is actually really useful, though. Some folks will say, well, this is just a visual. I need the raw data. I really need to know it matches up. But it really does help when we get execs and MLS operators on a call to say, you're going to have a lot harder time data sharing with this one versus that one. And there's no grade, there's no judgment, it just is. It's just objective information. So you can kind of probably help plan for your data share, knowing where you're going to have more difficulty. Now again, this is only data that comes out of the certified API. So some of these organizations are using non-standard, RETS databases that they're going to use in their integrations. We only certify what comes out of the API. But you would think that data that's standard coming out of an API is going to be a lot more likely to align with another data set than that which has not been certified. Any questions on the work we did on the one feed or the safety fields for realtors in the MLS that we worked on with NAR? You're carrying the load for him, Catherine. I know I like it. Ask as many as you've got.
Okay, Catherine McIntosh is listed. We work with we work with many MLSs, but one in particular, we have at least 9 feeds that get updated every hour. And the more feeds you have, the more challenge there is in like one of them breaking or one of them going down. So the idea of one feed is really appealing with all the data. How can we, if we're working with different providers that don't have the one feed, or explain the one feed and the benefit of the one feed to people we want to have adopt it so we can work with them on one feed?
Yeah, technically, it should be in place already, but sometimes, as you all know, the process of making policy doesn't always align perfectly with the timelines of implementing technology. So like a lot of things, we just need to get started. And so those things were supposed to be in place probably a year ago. At this point, for broker participants of an MLS, and those MLSs, they're supposed to have access to that. Doesn't necessarily mean any vendor gets access to a one feed. It's up to the MLS, but that's policy at NAR is about the MLS and the broker participant. That being said, if it's not available at this point, that's why we're building out this spec, and we have a solution to do it in a standard way. So the companies who haven't yet can do it in a way that the data consumers can make the same kind of request and expect the same kind of response that you would across 7 different vendors if you're working in that many different marketplaces. So that solution is approved by the Transport Work Group. Obviously, it takes time to implement, but how do you get them to do it? That's a great question. Carrot and stick approach is always an interesting balance, but probably from our perspective, we try to work with carrots as much as we can. So, none of these solutions are perfect. You're still going to find that aggregators who used to get 5,000 feeds now get 1,000 feeds, but they've still got to go in because they've got 3 different brokers in the same MLS marketplace. There are improvements that we'll continue to make on that, but there is a solution now to do the baseline of what was required by that policy.
Giselle Abadi from Realty Now. My question is about the feed types that each MLS has. Basically, we have IDX, IDX Plus, and VAL, and that's really creating a problem for the single feed situation, because certainly some MLSs that don't allow certain fields or certain listing types to be exposed to, I don't know, public-facing websites, things like that. So do we have any plan for addressing that?
So there are a lot of local business rules involved there, and there are a lot of decisions that are going to be made by the MLS and their brokers that are not RESO's domain to tell them what decisions to make about those fields. But we can provide better information. So we do have a standard going forward that would show you, so the newer metadata resources, basically the field resource, lookup resource, there's a model resource to help a data consumer say, this field is in IDX, it's in VAL, but it's not in broker back office. And not just have that be a license or an advertisement before you get a data set, but to actually exist and live inside that data feed. So from an informational perspective, we can help with that with the standard. There's been an ask to have something that's more about display rules, like do we need to have disclaimers along with this versus that? Can we publish coming soon in an IDX feed? Can we publish solds in X, Y, and Z scenarios? So I think that's what a lot of our folks are really working on, is how do we make it so that it's sort of, they were talking about portability earlier, making the information about the data feed portable so that the data consumers don't have to go through a bunch of policy and documentation. They just know how to read the data feed. There's work, it's not perfect, but it's getting much better than it was.
Thank you.
Thanks. We had a lot of time to talk about UPI this week. So we've got those 2 30-minute sessions, but they both run into happy hours. So they'll probably go longer than that. You could walk out, grab a drink, and come back in if you want to. But kind of the gist of it, where we are, is the first model, the first version, is very accurate. I think it was 99.98% accurate. Matt, you would know. Very, very accurate first model. And then after some research from Black Knight, which is now ICE, and then this year CoreLogic, there were some suggestions. I'm not going to take too long here because you're going to hear it again if you come to UPI, but there's some suggestions to do a version 2 that both improve the accuracy a little bit more, which doesn't seem like a big deal when you're 99.98, but if you happen to be the person with the wrong property records, that's the 0.02%, it is a big deal. And then makes it more universal with what's called a URN sort of model. There's a model where you can make sure something is truly unique anywhere because we have a namespace that's registered with, I think it's IANA, where you'll see the details. If this is starting to sound gross and technical, then don't come to the UPI meeting. But no, you really should. It's really exciting because we have some of the biggest data providers in the marketplace giving us real marketplace feedback. And I've said, this is how it works. We need to get this adopted across the industry, but we all need to agree on a version, and we need to look at the things that we found so far that aren't perfect yet and decide, do we want to improve those before we really roll it out to the industry? So you'll get to see some of that research at the UPI meeting, which is it's pretty exciting stuff.
Hi, Kat Newell from Vancouver, BC. On the UPI, and maybe this will come in the session on the UPI, but have we tested the UPI in different places around the world? Can it truly be universal?
So it can be, but as you know, the nuances of some countries make it very different. The parcel numbers are not public in some areas, whether that's because of regulation in some areas or whether it's just companies that have this data but don't want to share it publicly because they're making money from a service. So we find it's different depending on the environment or the country. There have been proposals to have the truly universal model for UPI that can be used anywhere because it's country, sub-country, basically the assessor organization. It can work internationally. But if you can't publish the parcel number, then you can't really use the model and you don't truly know. So there'll be a conversation about other potential ways to do that if your country doesn't allow you to publish a parcel number, whether you're hashing the data or something so you can still match on it. But that's actually the other part of the conversation right now is we were really focused on the US with this as it was built out. And it looks like it would provide a universal model. But what's our scope? Are we trying to solve the world right now with every one of our standards? Maybe, if it's the right thing. But that's for you all as members to decide.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, just given that some places there might not be parcel numbers, they might not be governed in the same way everywhere in the world.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Sorry. There. I'm vertically challenged. So just given it's the fact there might not be parcel numbers everywhere in the world, there might not be the same governance model when it comes to properties everywhere in the world. And so I think the whole idea of 80-20 rule when it comes to the UPI might be the best approach.
And to your point, actually there's lots of countries with a much easier system than we have. They have central land registries, that's all you need, and some of them are public and some of them are not. So it will be nuanced wherever we go, but I mean, I don't know that I've seen one yet that's more convoluted than the American version where we've got some counties and some cities and some townships and it's all on a piece of paper that was copied 15 times and stuffed in a drawer. It's pretty wild the way our system works. So that's why we obviously focused on the American market first, but we do need that international feedback. Thank you. Who's taken the red course? Nice, very nice. Yeah, that was, again, pain points, broker advisory sessions telling us to build the course, and they were right. Hugely successful course so far. If it's your first time at RESO, you should take the course. It's highly discounted for members. But when we start talking about NAR policy and governance and how that overlaps with associations and MLS membership, it's kind of stuff that can take people 5-10 years to figure out if you're just working on technology. So if you want to figure it out quickly and cut through all the mess of news organizations that make it sound more confusing than they should, it's a good, fairly quick course to really learn how all those things work together. And how many of you have been to our data dictionary wiki? Well, that's a lot more than I thought. Great. Okay. So ddwiki.reso.org, and it's easy to miss these stats. They don't look this big when you land on the page. There's a lot of other information about fields, but anytime you need that information, this is constantly updated in this system because we think things like MLS areas, we think we're going to see a trend where those kind of go away over time. We don't mandate that. It's not our position at RESO. But we'll be covering that and measuring it over time so we can see what's trending up and what's trending down. It should be helpful for MLS operators in making decisions about what fields are good for your market when your board, your volunteers come in and say, we need a new field next week. And sometimes that's what they do. It's good to have this kind of backup information to help you have a very even conversation about those kinds of decisions. And then we're going to have you in for the webinar, and our CTO is going to talk your ear off, and it's going to be great because he is the guy who was in the weeds on these things. So if you have questions about certification, obviously, but then the alignment reports, it's exciting. It's exciting, these products that he's putting out with the dev team right now. So it's going to be fun. It's fun to just put out technology for the world and see how it works for you. And we're trying to be as transparent as possible with these things. Because they've got to benefit your business, for you to spend the time and energy to be here and be RESO members. So that's our first RESO business issues session. If someone wants to get up and ask a question now, feel free. I'll hang out here if you have other questions you want to ask afterwards. But otherwise, the transport meeting's still going on in the other room if you'd like to go over there. And then don't forget at 4 o'clock, there's a couple more sessions. Yeah, I'll get you real quick, Rick. But if you do leave, 4 o'clock, Reception, Sunset Terrace, all the way down by the water behind this building there. Rick.
Thank you, Sam. And I'm sorry I didn't get it during the particular piece. When you were talking about translation, I'm curious about two fields and how you look at those. One, which is square footage, which is often expressed as square meters, and second, the denomination. So if you're looking at my site and it's in US dollars, and I'm looking at it in a French site, will it express that in francs? Or how have you thought about that? Tell me what you thought.
Yeah, good question. They're definitely two different things. So in terms of square footage, we know how erratic those actual measurements can be because it's usually just agents putting numbers in. And so it's kind of cool to see some of the new technology that just goes and measures a room for you. So we've got a third party to say they measured it this way. This is whoever standard it is, that's what the technology does. It's really just a question of how you input. You could put it in meters or you can put it in square feet when you input a listing. That's how most of the listing inputs are set up. If they use both of those, obviously most of them, the American MLSs, are using square feet, but they're two separate fields. So you put a number in on one field and then you select the measurement, the type of measurement in the other field. So that one is somewhat straightforward. The currency, that is going to be up to the technology implementers there. Most of what we've done has been in dollars. That's been kind of the way things were designed. I'm sure you've got to have a time-sensitive converter to actually be able to move prices back and forth if you were trying to show an American price in French francs. So kind of out of our domain, but a good thing that we need to look at to make sure we've got all those options available for the countries who might want to use it in a different way. Anybody here implemented anything with currency where you're converting those on the fly?
Hey, Sam. Yeah, Tyler Decker, FBS. One of our Mexico, or a couple of our Mexico MLSs, there's a new law where if the listing is entered in dollars, we also have to display the peso translation. So we worked through a bunch of different options there and ultimately decided like a separate field was not the way to go. So we basically built a dynamic display widget on the front end listing detail pages that translates the currency on the fly, like the most up-to-date, accurate, not storing data that's out of date as soon as like the currency rate changes.
And these are the best kind of answers when I don't have the answer and the actual technology companies get up and talk about it. So thanks for that, Tyler. Anybody else building a? Oh, we've got somebody over here. Go ahead.
I was going to ask a different question, so if anybody else is still on that, go ahead.
Any other comments on currency? Oh, different question?
Different question. I'll let him go first.
Okay.
Okay, Chris John Beck from the Auto Real Estate Board up in Canada. By the way, you started off a lot of this by saying you were going to have a bunch of jokes at the Canadians' expense, so don't feel bad. You all provide us plenty of fodder for jokes north of the border as well, so you're good. So my question, as part of kind of the international contingent, is there's this weird kind of balancing act that you all have to pull off where as you expand, the utility of the standardization becomes even stronger, but the need for flexibility to incorporate the process for different countries also is really important. So for those of us who are kind of trying to become more of a part of this is my first time here, what are kind of what's the process that you all would recommend? How can some of us in Canada and other places throughout the world who are looking to become a better, a larger part of this process, what should we do to jump in and kind of help guide that?
Rob Larson, do you want to answer that?
Because I'm going to cover that at the beginning of I got the sound now. I'll be covering that in the beginning of the session. But basically, we've got the online resources, we've got Confluence, and we've got the wiki. And conversation is a great place to start as well. So we have dd@reso.org. You can just send in an email with whatever topic you want. Depending on the depth of it, we might spin up a subgroup, or we might just talk about it and get it posted. And then that's the process. But I'll run over that again.
Okay. Thank you.
And data dictionary work groups coming up in this room afterwards too. So we're going to have to figure out if we're ending early, if we need to do anything on that timing. But yes.
Okay, so my question might be one that a lot of people already know the answer to in this room, but
I don't know the answer, so maybe you can help me. Just related to just bringing it back to the basics on certification, is there, like, what are the sort of criteria for certifying an MLS? And is there a threshold for sort of like the ratio of custom local fields to standard fields? And does anything prevent, say, an MLS from being certified and they have, 1,000 local fields and 2 standard fields? Or is there a threshold for that, or how does that work?
Not at the moment, no. You can be as localized as you want. The saying that Rob always says is, if you have it and the dictionary has it, you have to do it the dictionary way.
Gotcha.
But you don't have to use all of the dictionary. You can have as many local custom fields as are, only truly local and custom, and not just a different spelling of what a standard item is. There have been discussions in some work groups about what we used to call platinum certifications. If you have X percentage of standardized fields, then maybe we'd have different levels of certifications. But that's just an idea. It's just a conversation. So we don't require you have anything except modification timestamps and keys.
Gotcha.
So
sorry.
Go ahead.
And I was going to say, and then a follow-up to that is with the new certification for 2.0, my understanding is there's going to be a check for possible standard fields that are currently custom. Is that right?
Yes.
The little clippy image.
Yeah. So that's what we're saying is things that are mislabeled.
Yeah.
If they're mislabeled, if they're actually a standard element, they're virtually identical, but you're calling it something else, then we need to have the standard version in there. And that wasn't required in lookups previously. But if it is truly miles to volcano, and that's what you use in Hawaii, and we don't have it in the dictionary, then that local custom field can stay. And it's not just fine, it's important. It's critical that that's in the data feed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I think we did it. Thank you all. Appreciate it. We should figure out, Rob, what time do we start on your session?
Quarter after.
So we got a little, oh, it's quarter after. Well, I'm just going to hand off the reins to you then. Perfect. Good timing, folks. Appreciate it.